I'm sorry in advance. I'm still recovering from RSV. I've talked about it in my live streams. Throat's a little screwed up. Lungs are really screwed up. So, sorry in advance. One theme we have seen over and over again, especially in indie horror games these days, is being stalked by a foe you can't defeat. Trying to solve puzzles, trying to trap an enemy, or simply just run for your life is a trend that's going to be staying around. We have recently seen this in the new Silent Hill game called The Short Message. Games like Amnesia: The Dark Descent made careers on YouTube for many creators, and Outlast created not just a single game, but a franchise deep in lore. There was even 3D Monster Maze from 1981, seeing you run away from a dinosaur. One game to take that concept, the main character being stalked by a singular killer, and created a narrative that greatly impacted horror game history, that is now forgotten by many players even though it has influenced their favorite horror games, is that of Clock Tower. The first video I wanted to make on my channel was that game, and I have scrapped it several times. Similar to the franchise itself, I lacked a good vision for the long run of those videos. Today, I really want to look at the profound impact Clock Tower had all the way back in 1995. Clock Tower, despite what you may remember, did not come out in the United States on the Super Nintendo. There were many fake and illegal copies that are around, and I even have one myself. I liked the game a lot, but it was originally not released for us here. Human Entertainment developed this game under releasing games in the Fire Pro Wrestling franchise. Hifumi Kono was set to direct a new game, and he was looking for influences in places not many go at this point, but I think that is to the industry detriment, and that is Italian Giallo films. In the case of Kono, he was looking specifically at the works of Dario Argento and his film Phenomena. Now, I watched the movie, and I honestly can't tell you how it exactly influenced this game. Mostly I can see the influences on the main character and some of the thematic elements used in that style of film. The game itself would fit right in on PC games for that time, except for the fact it wasn't developed for the PC but for the Super Famicom, or the Super Nintendo for those outside of Japan. It's not unheard for the point-and-click games to be put on consoles, but this was developed for that system specifically. There's a distinct feel that those kind of games have, and that isn't what the Super Nintendo was known for. Apparently, even people on the team thought the game was too slow-paced and boring. And from what I read, they changed their tune right after the game was released and saw success. The game is slow. You have a cursor that dictates where you go and what you interact with. There's a singular enemy in this game unless you count that damn bird.
Oh, fine. If you're not going to be nice, I'll just have myself a refreshing talk with the bird. Oh, God. Nope. Please, stop. Are you talking to me? Are you saying something?
I kiss you. I kiss you. I'm near you.
I'll kill you.
If you played any games like Phantasmagoria, that was released this same year, you might be used to this style of gameplay. The game has its fair share of puzzles that you need to figure out, sequences that could determine the life and death of other young women in the story, as well as trying to get away and hide from the only enemy in the game, which you really can't fight back from. One of the things that makes this game more interesting narratively above some games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill is that there's a sense of murder mystery around the whole thing. And it's not this crazy scientific blunder or even the spiritual realm interacting with us, but something that starts out rather relatable. Evil in human form. A mystery from the very beginning. We don't even know who the man is who is adopting a bunch of teenage girls. In the first moments of the game, we learn nothing about what is going on. And throughout the whole run of the game, we learn not only more about our character's background, but the house that they are in, who the Barrows are, and what the hell is going on with a small man with a giant pair of scissors. Giallo films are murder mysteries, usually very gory, lacking characterization of the cast, and some of the more experimental cinematography. This game does that in spades, even though it was done on the Super Famicom. Even though games at the time on that system were bright and full of colors, this game stood out. Not because it muted everything, but it used the color spectrum to highlight important things. My personal favorite touch was the coloring detail done on the main character, Jennifer. Her physical appearance is the same as her namesake of Jennifer Connelly in the previously mentioned Phenomena. The sprite work is well defined and beautifully done, even when the images they make might not be the prettiest, such as the stalker in this game, the Scissor Man. The few cutscenes are beautifully done, definitely giving into the inspiration of that film style. In fact, one of my favorite enemy entrances is done in this game, and it is that genre all the way. Now, there always is this huge discussion on what is and what is not survival horror. I know the marketing team for Capcom are the ones who use survival horror as a way to market Resident Evil, and frankly, I would argue that the term is useless. But if I have to use it to describe a game or franchise, then I will. But it also fits Sweet Home and Clock Tower. The elements are all there, and since you're unable to fight back, then this game, I would argue, leans much harder into the realm of survival than the other games previously mentioned. Looking at the modern horror landscape, it's easy to see where Clock Tower has influenced others. We have Nightcry, which is the spiritual successor by some of the staff that made the original Clock Tower. It has some mixed results, but it's clear that they were looking at that inspiration that brought them Clock Tower in the first place.
I said something inside here, grabbing my hand.
Oh, Harry, the Gregory Peck Act is a bit outdated,
Oh,
don't
Harry.
you think?
I'm serious.
See, I kind of remember that. Yes.
We also have Remothered, Tormented Fathers, and its sequel, though there are more mainstream games that have clearly taken that inspiration. But before we get too far, it's important to discuss those games. Nightcry is basically Clock Tower game in all but name. Hifumi Kono, who made the first few games, was back and wanted to make another in the spirit of the original, but sadly, I do feel like this game kind of lost the plot a little bit. It has the blood, it has the gore, and a mystery to solve. The killer even has a large pair of scissors, but it's missing something. I feel like the game lost a little bit in the spirit of the original series. I don't think it's 100% on the story for that fault, but I think it's a combination of the frustrating point-and-click controls that never feel quite right. None of the cinematography of the Giallo style is brought in, and with that combination, this feels slightly more like a knockoff than a true follow-up. With that game, though, there is a man who worked on it and later made what I believe is a far better representation of what Nightcry should have been, and that is Remothered. Chris Durrell had actually worked on Nightcry, and doing so delayed his own game. Now, Remothered takes a lot from the game that came before, but one thing this game does is actually carry that spirit of the original with it. We still have a form of the point-and-click style, but it's evolved and combined with a more modern control style. Simply works better in a 3D environment that the Nightcry team never really solved. But something more important, that it brings back some of that cinematic feel of Argento's work in the story and the cutscenes. How it's all brought together in this unique feel that I think is missing in horror games in general. One that goes out of its way to be both beautiful and making sure that you feel uncomfortable as a player. There's a lot of twists and turns when it comes to this game, so I won't spoil too much. Resident Evil has its own distinct flair, and I don't think many people would associate these two franchises together. But they do have some connecting points. Resident Evil 2 had a B-side that had you running away from what the community has called Mr. X. And the remake of the game takes that element and puts it front and center.
Jesus Christ!
Mr. X, or one of the tyrants, stalks the player throughout the police station as a major story beat in the main game. Similar to what we would have expected of Nemesis in the remake of the third game, though for some reason it was done to a much lesser degree, was something that still baffles me a little bit, even though I prefer playing that one over the original. Even used to speedrun it for a little bit. Holy fuck! Oh. One of the more popular games to stream every October uses this stalker mechanic as well. That game is Outlast. Trapped in a mental hospital of the criminally insane where the inmates are in control of the facility is bad enough, but when you're being stalked by several of the more dangerous inmates, all intent on doing grievous bodily harm at the bare minimum, is even worse. The atmosphere is drastically different than Clock Tower. There is no Argento influence in the look and feel, but they got that one mechanic, and they dialed it up to 11. If you're a fan of jump scares and cheap gore, I think this might be the game for you. Though apparently there is a ton of lore that is out there for this, and I really need to look into it. I've said this before about this kind of game. The issue is that the legacy left by this game is in the amazing games that came after it. Not the sequels, those weren't the best. But the legacy left are in all the games I just talked about. Maybe this is just a personal thing, but I always wanted to leave some sort of legacy, and frankly, this game managed to do it. We had multiple spiritual successors in Nightcry and Haunting Ground. Rumor has it that was originally supposed to be Clock Tower 4, before the dismal results of Clock Tower 3. Without Clock Tower, I'm not sure we would have had Mr. X or Nemesis. We definitely would not have gotten Remothered, and I wonder about all the indie games that have used the look and feel of Clock Tower. I'm sure games would have moved in this direction anyways, but I'm about to use a massive cliche that Clock Tower walked so the rest of these games could run.